Hey everybody, it is Tuesday morning and we are going to do a little around the world update, but today we're going to make it a quickie because I don't really have a lot to talk about in most of my tanks, but I did lose 3 fish this week and I got a couple of odds and ends going on, so I want to do enough of an update to catch up on the things that have changed, but I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about things that haven't. I've got a bunch of other videos I want to get shot. So let's get on with it. This is my 29 miscellaneous where we always start. Unfortunately, I'm now beginning to see how much of an impact. You can see my legs there in the reflection. That's how much of an impact my open top tank behind us is going to make on the room. I always have struggle with glare on the tanks and everything. A lot of times I have to turn certain tanks off, like my Waterfall tank, for example. I always have to turn that off whenever I shoot video because it puts so much glare on the tank. And since I recently changed over my native tank, it looks like we're going to have that issue, especially in regards to this tank, considering they're facing each other. So we're going to unfortunately have to deal with that kind of reflection from now on. Other than that, nothing's really changed in this tank. I did a filter change and cleaned out the biofilters. This tank's, for some reason, the biofilters get clogged up really fast. And every couple of weeks I have to get in there and scrub them out. Otherwise, I get a bunch of backflow. I also pulled a bunch of cyanobacteria out of there. You can see some of that green stuff growing on there. So I had a little bit of film of that growing on the surface, and some of the water sprite that was in there had that on it. So I pulled that out and just went ahead and threw it away. I got so much water sprite, I did not need to save that, so I didn't worry about it. But other than that, everything is going swimmingly, pun intended. And we'll just move on to my 55-gallon gourami tank. Other than being in some need of a little bit of maintenance, I've got nothing going on in here, really. I do want to move my moonlight gourami. I'm considering that. I just don't know when or where yet. I'm thinking my 125 and with my Tenopoma and snakeskin gourami, I think they'd all get along just fine. I don't know if the moonlight would look right in that tank. I'm sure it would. They're gorgeous no matter where you put them, and they're so reflective. They'll actually reflect a lot of the colors that are in that tank anyway. Of course, if I put it in there, I'll have to deal with my floating vegetation getting destroyed. As you can see that he's working on Java fern, which is pretty tough, chewy stuff. I keep putting chunks of water sprite in the tank for him, and they just keep getting devoured down to little nubs. So I'll pull that out, I'll throw it in a bucket, let it grow back out and recover, and then I'll throw it back in the tank eventually. But you can't keep it in the tank or it gets eaten. I'm really surprised my temple plant is not shredded up and chewed up. It does nibble on it, but not a lot, so maybe it just simply doesn't like the flavor of the temple plant. I don't know. But otherwise, not much going on in this tank. My 55-gallon T-bar tank is no exception. Don't really have anything going on in here. Did a water change this week, but nothing special. No filter change or anything like that. My Anubias is getting pretty much out of control, and I need to do something about it. I don't know if I want to get in there and snip this way back. You can see these rhizomes coming up here, and I've got rhizomes coming up here, and I got another chunk here. I've got this big shoot coming up in the back. So, I don't know. At some point, we're going to have to get in there and thin those Anubias out, but for now, I'm not going to worry too much about it. You can see you can kind of almost see my big pleco sitting there if it wasn't for all the glare. This, open top tank is really putting a lot of light out in the room now. I was hoping that wasn't going to be a problem, but apparently it is. So my 40 breeder, I lost a fish in this tank this week. It was one of my little praycocks, rainbow fish, little neon rainbow fish. So I'm down to that last remaining one. I had 8 of them in here at one point. A lot of them died off fairly quickly. And then one by one, I've just been losing them. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if they're really sensitive fish. I'm not sure if they're really short-lived fish. Don't really know what's going on with them, but they're pretty much all gone now, except for that last one. Otherwise, not much going on in here. I haven't done any work or changed anything out. And pretty much that's about it. I do need to get in here and do some work. You can see the glass needs a wiping. It's been a while since I've worked on the filter. you know, that sort of thing. Just some typical basic maintenance, nothing special, but I do need to get in there and do some of that stuff. So this is the big change. If you haven't already seen this, is my native tank that I've redesigned and put a series of floodlights. Those are the Cree brand floodlights, and they use the Cree chips. They are the 90 plus CRI, CRI being the color rendering index, and that gives you an idea of how accurately they represent natural sunlight. And anything over 90% accurate to natural sunlight is a very, very high quality light indeed, and it makes this tank look just absolutely fantastic. I'm in love with it again. Feeding this tank is great now too, because it's open top. I can just toss the food in and feed the fish. I'm practically waiting for like the ducks and the geese to come up so I can toss them some bread. It's like being out at the pond, you know, at the public park, where I can just feed the fish and stuff. So that's pretty cool. I did try to set the camera up on a tripod on top of the tank here, so we could get, you know, a nice looking down sort of view like this on the tank and watch the feeding. But of course the fish must have known the camera was rolling, because they absolutely refused to come out and eat. They just laid down where they always do, and they waited for the food to come to them. And then of course I stopped the camera and I threw some more food in, and they all came exploding to the top and splashing around and looking awesome. So I'll trick them into it one of these days. I'll set the camera up and then leave, and I'll come back an hour later after they've forgotten I set the camera up. And when they're not expecting it, I'll go ahead and feed them and have the camera rolling, and we'll get a cool video of them, you know, doing their thing, splashing on the surface and all that, because they're really aggressive when they feed, as you can probably imagine. So that's about all that's going on in this tank. I really am thinking about what I want to do to it now. I've started rethinking it now that we're seeing it like this. Honestly, I don't even really need to change the scape, although I'm going to. I just need to get, the main thing I want to do is get these creek chubs out of here. That's goal number one. I can live with the shiners being in there. In fact, I'm going to leave the shiners in there. And I can live with those suckerfish in the bottom. I don't necessarily want all three of them in there. It's a bunch of unnecessary bioload. But, you know, if I don't catch any of them and all three of them stay in there, that's fine. The only fish I want to get out of there is the chubs, because they are so aggressive and so predatory. And once that's done, then I can start putting some little minnows in there. Maybe we can go catch some of those rosy side dace. I do have some new boots on order. They will be showing up today, so hopefully later today we can go and get the minnow trap set out. You know, get started working on that kind of stuff. Maybe shoot some video walking down the street or something. So look forward to that. Moving on, there's no point in talking about my snail tank. I just breed snails in there. My 40 breeder gudgeon tank. Not a lot to talk about in here either. I finished treating for the cyanobacteria. I left the air stone in it just because the air stone was keeping my duckweed problem under control. And because of that, I've just never bothered to get in there and take the air stone out. I don't like the way that air line looks, and I really don't like those bubbles in there. If you know me and my fish tanks, you know I don't like bubbles in my aquarium. But I honestly don't spend enough time down here in the fish room anymore, at least not this time of year, that it bothers me. I don't see it long enough for it to get annoying. I see it for a few minutes like we're looking at it now, and then I move on, or I'm down here feeding everybody, and I'm not concerned about bubbles when I'm just in there making sure everybody gets fed. But otherwise, the tank is still just ticking over. It doesn't really look like it needs another treatment just yet, but it does need a cleaning. I need to get in there and wipe the glass down. I have a fair amount of light on this tank, and as a result I get a lot of growth on the glass and stuff, so need to get in there and do a little bit of work on that tank. But otherwise nothing really going on in there. So let me walk around my waterfall tank here so we can get to this one. My 125 gallon tank experienced a loss over the last week, although I'm sure by now you're all familiar with that. I lost my Synodontis catfish that was in this tank. That is another fish I've lost recently. And other than that, nothing really going on. I did do a water change, did not bother with the filter, but I did get in there and wipe the glass down. And I did a fairly significant water change. It was maybe 25%. I dropped maybe 8 inches or 9 inches of water out of the tank, something like that. Everybody's doing well. My rainbow fish are still growing and still looking fantastic. I was wondering whether or not I was going to regret getting the albinos, as I fell in love with them when I saw them. But after I got to thinking about them for a while, you know, they're basically just orange fish. They don't have a lot of like flash and color and stuff. They're just sort of orange. But when you really start looking at them, they are really so much more than just orange fish. And when they mature and they start showing whatever spawning colors they're going to show, it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of spawning colors albino fish show. But I have faith that they are going to be pretty amazing when they finally mature and get into spawning condition. So the other thing I did was I removed a lot of the vegetation out of this end of the tank. I cut back my lotus. I cut back a lot of java. I cut back a lot of Anubias, which of course I do have for sale. I might even take some of that Anubias and put it in my waterfall tank and have it growing up and out of the water, or growing up and out of the waterfall. And unfortunately, because of all the glare on everything now, you can't really see it. And unfortunately, a couple of my lotus flowers have filled, or lotus leaves have covered the gap. But there was a nice little gap right there that let light shine all the way down into the bottom. And again, I know it's a big glare. Let me try to block it a little bit. Well, it's not really doing much. But you could see a big spot of light shining down there right into the bottom of the tank, and it really lit up that woodwork nicely. And then of course when the fish swam through there, because it's a nice little sort of hiding cave, and they get in there and then that light would shine down on them, so I was really enjoying that. I might have to get in there and kind of trim those plants back a little bit just to make sure I can open that back up again and get that effect. That was really a good looking effect. So this is the tank I'm considering putting my Moonlight gourami. If you're wondering why I walk up like that tank like that, everything, I've got this next to it, so I have to work around that whenever we're looking at this tank. And today we will be able to get to a quick update on the waterfall tank included in this round the world update. So that's all that's really going on over here. Again, just a nice look at the tank. I like to give everybody a chance to take it all in for a few minutes, so I'll chatter on even though there's nothing really going on in this tank other than the loss of my Synodontis. Again, just really, really happy with this tank and the way everything's worked out, and that nice sort of reddish, orange, amber, all those earth tone colors in there that go so nicely with the green planted tank. And then I've got my red or reddish crypt in the front. And then, of course, my red on my tiger lotus down there, and my earth tone rock work that I started the tank out with. This one really came together nicely, so it's been up and running for years now, and it just keeps looking better and better as time goes on. I'm really happy with this tank. So moving on to my 20-gallon Angelfish tank. We are doing a little experiment on this tank this week. I have been wondering whether or not my my water sprite grows like this due to a CalMag deficiency, or is it growing like this because it is now out of the water and exposed to atmospheric air. So I'm doing a little experiment. I tested some of my CalMag solution, nutrient supplement for my plants, and it didn't really have a huge impact on the sample water I took. And by impact, I mean it didn't shift the pH, it didn't really seem to affect the hardness. It did really crank up the total dissolved solids though. So if I were to have mixed the CalMag solution up to the right, to be what I would water my plants with, I would have had to put 20, I would have had to put, 20 5 milliliter doses in here, right? Because I put 5 milliliters per gallon of water. So as much as that raised the total dissolved solids in my little test batch, just putting 5 mil in, I decided that was going to be way too much to put in this tank. So I put 15 mil of CalMag solution in here, and it raised the total dissolved solids in the tank from 305 to 424. So I increased the total dissolved solids by a third, and that was simply adding calcium and magnesium to my very, very soft water. So it's going to be interesting to see if that has any kind of an impact on my water sprite here. I have heard from more than one viewer that has said that theirs does the same thing when it gets exposed to atmospheric air, so I'm assuming that maybe that's just what this is going to look like. And I also have a viewer who said that they have it growing in a covered tank, like my gourami tank. I always used to complain how it would get all twisted and curled and gnarled and weird looking. They claim it is from growing up against the hot glass, and then the glass damages the tissue, which causes the twisting and the turning and the curling, and that makes perfect sense. So it is very likely that me adding that CalMag solution is going to have no impact on this plant at all, but that's still a result. It still tells us something, and if that's the case, then I'll know not to waste my time putting any CalMag in my tanks. At least not for this plant. I do have a plant upstairs in one of my tanks that needs calcium and magnesium, and I'm looking for a way to provide it while simultaneously not jacking up the water hardness, because I have a German blue ram in that tank, and I want to keep the water hardness very soft in that tank. So that's about all we got going on in there. I got nothing going on in my what do you call it? My quarantine tank. Let's get this other forward light turned on here. It's got a difficult little switch on the end that I can't ever get to. There we go. Alright, we're all discombobulated here. Alright, told you this was a very impromptu video. So, my big bloated sailfin molly that was in here finally passed away. Found him the other day, dead, stuck up against the filter, and he was all pine coned out. His little scales were all sticking out, and so he is no longer with us. I am considering adding new mollies to this tank, but I'm just not sure what I want to do yet. I was thinking about just regular old mollies that I could have got from the Petco the other day. I was down there. I know I normally go to the PetSmart, but the Petco has a pretty good selection of live bearers, and they had some interesting mollies, and they had some interesting swordtails, and all of them were fish that I might have wanted to bring home, but I think anything that's going to go in this tank is going to have to be something equally as special as those orange sailfins. I also still have that one orange sailfin that's still alive and well, and if I get any other live bears in this tank, I'm going to have to keep in mind the male-female ratio, because I can't, get a male and a female to put in this tank, which I'd like to do. I'd like to get a breeding pair, but if I get a male and a female, my existing male will make it 2 males to 1 female, and that's just not a tenable condition for a female in a live bear situation. That poor fish will get stressed to death if it's got 2 males to 1 female. Should be the other way around if possible, or even 3 females to every 1 male. The live bears are pretty relentless when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet, but I did lose the one molly, and I have, I jacked up the salinity in this tank again to get it back up into the range of brackish. I was hoping maybe that would act as a sort of salt bath for the bloated molly, but it did not. And, of course, you can see the snail graveyard going on down there in the bottom. I really need to get in there and gravel vac. At least, well, I don't really gravel vac. I just take a siphon hose and I get in there and I remove all of the dead snail shells as carefully as I can without sucking any of the gravel out. So I need to do that and just do a basic water change. And I want to bring the salinity back down just a little bit. And you can see Butterbean still has those little white marks on him around his head, but not anywhere near as bad as it used to be. So whatever that was, it's tending to clear up, I think. We can get it to focus on him again. There, you get a pretty good look at him. So you can see he's still got those sort of lesions on the top of his head and those white marks on his back and everything, but it's nothing like it used to be. So perhaps keeping it, continually in that higher salinity all the time, year after year, really was having its impact, and maybe it does need to come down into fresh water occasionally, or even just stay on the sort of upper end of fresh water, sort of between fresh and brackish, or on that line, and maybe that'll keep him healthier. I don't know. But that'll be my next goal in this tank, will be to lower the salinity again and maybe start rethinking what fish we want to put in there. So, since we are only 20 minutes in, and I normally do these for half an hour, we're going to go ahead and have a look at my Waterfall tank. That is my little spotlight I turn on. Now this light, actually, I really don't need it too much anymore. This was designed to shine on my dead nettles back there, but I mean, and it still does, but the dead nettles have actually also rooted in so many places throughout here that they're getting plenty of light. So this is my big LED, and that's just a huge amount of light. It just does not convey on camera. The camera obviously adjusts to it so that you get a nice clear picture. But I shot a video the other day where I was giving a little thank you for my 20,000 subscribers, and you could see the camera was just a white washout glare where the waterfall tank was, and then you could see everything else in the room. And that gives you an idea of how bright it was. It's just an insane amount of light that's being dumped on this tank. So this tank had a dead guppy floating in it the other day, and that makes my third dead fish. I lost the rainbow fish, I lost my live bearer, and then I lost the guppy in here. I lost my molly, that's the word I was looking for. My sailfin molly, the guppy, and the rainbow fish were the three fish I lost over a period of 2 days. And then, of course, my catfish I lost last week, so I'm not really counting that in that little cluster of 3 fish that I've lost. So the only thing really new to talk about with my waterfall tank here is I've got aphids again. I brought a free plant home from the nursery. Decided I didn't like it after a couple days. In fact, I came down and it had those little bugs on it that look like little tufts of cotton. I don't know what they are, but they look like little tufts of cotton, and when you touch them, they jump away. So I had those on it and decided, well, I'm not doing that. So I took it up and took it outside and tossed it in the yard, and it's probably just going to die out there over the winter because I just don't care about it. Don't even know what it really was. But apparently it must have had aphids on it, because I now have aphids again in this mess. And of course it's so much thicker and bushier now than the last time I had to deal with aphids. But I have been spraying again and getting in there. I don't know if I'm ready to do something with this or not. I'm really starting to, it's just getting so thick and bushy and overgrown. You can't even see through any of this. I mean, it's ridiculous how thick this is. There's all kinds of stuff back there. There's flowing water and little waterfalls trickling, and there's all kinds of stuff going on that in theory we should be able to see and enjoy. There's a whole entire top tier up here that has a pool that's deep enough that I could actually either grow plants out of it or keep fish in it. But you can't even tell it's back there because it just looks like I have this massive pile of growth. So we'll see. We'll do something with that. Here, let me turn my other light on. This is my, usually turn this one on later in the evening. That gives you a nice, good look on the inside of the tank. So I noticed the other day that I had 3 nearite snails crawling around in this tank. And I only ever remember putting 2 nearite snails in this tank. And to my knowledge, both of those nearite snails are dead. Those shells have been in there for a while now, and again, those are the 2 nearite snails I put in there, and yet I've got 2 dead snail shells, and the other day I saw 3 smaller nearite snails crawling around on the glass. There's one of them now, but I did see 3 all at the same time. So there's definitely, at least as of a few days ago, there's definitely 3 of them in there that are still alive. So not sure what's going on with that. I was always under the impression that nearite snails needed salt water, or at least very brackish water, in order to breed. But did mine? I've got more snails than I started with, and the 2 that I started with are no longer in there. We can see they're dead, their shells, and yet I still have 3 nearite snails in there, and I swear I didn't go out and buy some that I forgot about. I don't really buy the nearite snails because I've never had a lot of success with them. If I bought snails, they probably would have been mystery snails. In fact, I was thinking about putting some mystery snails in this tank the other day, and then I discovered I have 3 nearite snails in here that I just did not even know were in there. So that was kind of a unusual discovery. My little tank right here, I also want to point out, I've got my bucket full of junk sitting right in front of it at the moment. But this tank, I finally got in there and took the pre-sponge filter off of my water pump. That thing clogged up faster than the sponge filter in my 29. Every 2 days I had to get in there and clear it out because I was getting zero flow. I mean, it would turn stagnant within a couple days. So I took the filter out, and now it's just a straight pump, pumping the water right on through. And it's been about 3 days since I changed it over, and yet we're still seeing this much in the way of water. I mean, we're still getting dripping over here. It's keeping my little plant right there watered. I didn't even do that. That just kind of happened by accident, so I'm just letting it go, and we'll see what happens to it, because that's kind of interesting. And I also wanted to point out that this used to be a brackish tank, and apparently enough salts got absorbed into the wood that now that it's a freshwater tank and water works its way up in the wick effect and it's evaporating out the end of this wood, it's carrying the salts along with it, and then of course it gets to the end of the line, the water evaporates away and says see you later to the salt, leaving the salt behind on the end of that piece of wood. So that's actually what's happening over time to cause that salt buildup on the end of that piece of wood. That's from when this was a brackish aquarium. So I just found that to be interesting. So that's about it. That's all I can think of to talk about with all of what's going on. I know I said that was going to be a quickie, but considering we got my waterfall tank and the little tank in front of my waterfall tank included in that, and we're still under half an hour, I'll call that a quickie after all. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Sorry for all this glare. It really gets glared up when we've got the waterfall tank lit up. That thing lights up the whole room. So make sure you subscribe. That way you won't miss anything I got coming up. You never know what it's going to be. And then don't forget, of course, this one here is my 29 miscellaneous tank. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon on the next one.